Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the new episode of the Ambassador's Lounge. I am Imran Yavar, your host for this episode. Last week, we had introduced a slight change in our format and had invited a former Foreign Secretary to seek his perspective and views on various aspects of Pakistan's foreign policy. Continuing in the same trend, today we have another veteran diplomat, a former Foreign Secretary, and we will ask him questions about Pakistan's foreign policy challenges. He is Mr. Salman Bashir. Mr. Salman Bashir was our Foreign Secretary. He was also our ambassador to Beijing, to China, and has rich experience of multilateral diplomacy. Sir, welcome to the Ambassador's Lounge.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sir, to open the discussion, let me just ask you a broad-based question. What do you think, as a former Foreign Secretary, as a seasoned diplomat, what do you think in the present scenario are the basic challenges confronting Pakistan's foreign policy?
Thank you. I think the basic challenges, in my view, is number one, we need to accurately read the global situation, the dynamics. I think for any foreign office, it is important to have its fingers on the pulse of history. This is a time of phenomenal changes, fundamental changes in the international environment, in the international order. And if we are able to read these changes and these dynamics accurately, I believe we made it. And the second thing, of course, is then to position ourselves accordingly, to defend our interests, and to gain from these dynamics if we can. And of course, that requires a Herculean effort. First of all, at home, we have to make Pakistan strong internally, more cohesive, more vibrant economically. And let me just add that I see that whatever is happening in my assessment around us, in our neighborhood, and in the world, is leading us to better times for Pakistan. I think we are, because of these changes that are taking place, being placed in an advantageous situation. But as I said earlier, the first point, we have to be mindful of these changes. And in my estimation, we are in a good spot.
Let me open the floor, sir. Asif.
Thank you, Imran. So, what makes you so optimistic about good opportunities awaiting for Pakistan, especially when you say that whatever is happening around the world and keeping in view the myriad challenges Pakistan is facing?
Well, Asif, it's rather simple, straightforward, common sense. Our geography has, like Afghanistan's geography, in the past been seen as a cause of disruption internally and around us. Nevertheless, Pakistan's geo-economic significance is bound to become a huge asset as the world changes and as our region changes. If you allow me, I can just elaborate a little bit. And I'm sorry to again, at the very beginning, bring India into this. As you know, India's declared policy, official policy, was to isolate Pakistan. In my estimation, instead of Pakistan being isolated, It is India that is isolated within the region. Why? Because they have been blindsided to reason and rationality. They have not been able to understand what is happening around us and within us in our societies. If you look at the situation today, right, all around India, the smaller neighbors are awash with anti-India sentiments.
But do you think that it will make a difference for
Absolutely.
India?
No, I am just trying to make a comparison. The comparison is that India set out to isolate Pakistan. I believe that India is isolated within the region. And that is a huge, huge calamity for India.
So naturally, then what should happen to India if India is isolated?
Well, they are doing to themselves what even their well-wishers would have hoped they will not do. I just want to make one point before I proceed. There's the Asian Times article by Seema Mustafa, which talks about the high pitch that has been reached in Maldives in terms of the anti-India sentiment. The government in Maldives is pro-India, but it is brimming with discontent. Look at Bangladesh, a government that owes its installation and support for years and decades now to India. The public sentiment is not so conducive as far as India is concerned. Look at Nepal, a Hindu state. And they've had the courage to look Indians in the eye and to say that you cannot take our territory. Everybody around, Sri Lanka, the other case.
Mr. What about the international environment? I mean, the world is siding with India.
Yes, you are right. Yeah, but the world is siding with India. Why? But we have to look at it as neighbors and as first effectees. I believe the Pakistani outlook on India has to be much deeper and it has to be correct. And if you permit, I would like to make a few points in this regard. Essentially, there is a huge crisis of identity as far as India is concerned. What is India? Gandhi, Nehru, and all the years that have gone by, India was seen as a bastion of democracy, a huge market. The BJP rhetoric, starting with Atal Bihari Vajpayee, carried on by the present administration, rising and shining India. Every national day that has happened in those years, one has heard the song and tune of rising and shining India. Whereas in Pakistan, our leadership said, well, we have overcome this crisis and we will overcome the next crisis. You know, we had a much more sober, realistic assessment of our conditions and our environment. Whereas the Indian public opinion was led to believe that they are the best, that they are the next superpower. Now, that's one point. But going back to the issue of the identity crisis, what is India? I hope my Indian friends would not mind some plain speaking. Today's India was a product of British imperialism, a collection of fiefdoms and princely states which were brought under the British administration and then given independence. Indian Union is today a product of British imperialism. To maintain the Union, the Indian leadership has opted for retaining that imperial mindset. If you look at all the readings, and it's not my view, I can quote you 3 clear instances, printed words. Jaswant Singh, who died a few days ago, in his book, Defending India, says that the present frontiers of India, political frontiers, do not conform to its strategic frontiers, which actually extend from Central Asia to almost the borders of Myanmar. Shyam Saran, former Foreign Secretary, a colleague of mine in Geneva, very well-known, reputed Indian diplomat, in his book, which is titled How India Looks at the World, says very clearly that the reintegration of those parts which are now outside the political borders of India has been the defining feature of Indian foreign policy. You can do it by 2 ways: using India's asymmetrical advantages in terms of size and strength, by dominating them, or by creating interdependencies. More recently, you would have seen the book by the present Foreign Minister of India, Subramaniam Jaishankar. He talks of 3 burdens with which India started. And the first burden he mentions is the partition. The Indian mindset about partition has affected their psyche so deeply that they are simply unable to get out of it. I have served in Delhi, and I would not have believed it if somebody was to tell me. But that sort of obsession that the Indians have with Pakistan, it is unbelievable. And they deeply, deeply in their mind, in their thought, and I'm talking here of their strategic thinkers, all their thinking is how to undo Pakistan.
Right, sir.
Undo the partition. And they mix it up with myths, going back to 325 BC, the Chandragupta Maurya age, forgetting all the millenniums in between. That is the problem.
Taking this discussion further, Tanveer, do you have?
Sir, first of all, welcome to the Ambassador Lounge. I would like to ask you regarding in your tenure as a Foreign Secretary, I remember you were the proponent of the policy Look East. And I would like to ask you with regard to ASEAN, our relation with ASEAN, because we were sectoral partner with sector, and I think we have not moved much from there. Do you think it has been some default with the Foreign Office or the line ministries or our overall interest? What went wrong? Because we have really not advanced what we were many years ago.
I think, Tanveer, the reason for that is very simple. Our plate in the Foreign Office has always been full. There is the question of the urgent and the immediate over what is really required. I had the comfort when I was the Additional Secretary Asia Pacific to focus on East Asia, and we called it the East Asia Vision. And I was fortunate to have Riaz Khokhar Saab as the Foreign Secretary, my immediate boss. And of course, at that time, the Prime Minister Shaukat Aziz, who himself was very familiar with that region. He had good friends in Thailand, in Hong Kong, and other places, and President Musharraf. And I think our greatest achievement at that time was to override the Indian veto and become full members of the ASEAN Regional Forum. That was absolutely Pakistan's, in my humble estimation, greatest achievement.
And that also corroborates your point that India failed to isolate Pakistan. I mean, if you go from
So
the hindsight.
that is correct, but it required a lot of effort, a lot of footwork. We had the president and the prime minister take swings in the region.
And they had the understanding.
And then, of course, it was not only just that. There was substance, there was content that was being built. There were 2 or 3 easy formulas. This was the time when the war on terror became a fashion.
A buzzword.
Yeah, a buzzword. So with each of these countries, we had an MOU on anti-terror cooperation. The next big theme that we played in this region, and which was, I think, more important, was trade. We started FTA negotiations, free trade negotiations, or preferential tariff negotiations with nearly every country which was member of the ASEAN. Riaz Khokhar, myself, we toured these countries repeatedly. Cambodia, Laos, nobody had been there. But if you have the Foreign Secretary of Pakistan visit Cambodia and Laos, Vientiane, you went, you saw, and they appreciated. So we built a substantial lobby that supported Pakistan's entry into the ARF, which brought us, again, at par with the great powers. Who are the members of the ARF? The United States, Canada, China, others, India, and we were at par. But the idea was not really to sort of hit India, because when you talk to the Indians, Indian strategic community always talks about, Act East policy. And I say to them, you can continue to look at the waters of the Indo-Pacific or the Pacific Ocean. What good will it do? What the Indian mindset, the strategic thinking has been, is ignore Pakistan. People like Shiv Shankar Menon and others, when I was the High Commissioner, said it almost plainly, that let them be on their own, they will self-destruct. It's the other way around. So, now this fashion about the Quad, the Indo-Pacific, the new terminology that has come in. What business does India have to show its naval flags in the East China or the South China Sea? Mm-hmm. Silly to the extreme. Their submarines sink in the harbor,
Yeah.
What is their capacity? So people would really have to be totally blind to believe that the Indians will be able to secure the waters of the Indian Ocean.
But they consider Indian Ocean as their private lake.
Yeah, but it is a question, Asif, of capacities. Let's not miss out. We have our narratives. The Indians have a narrative, we have a narrative. Everybody has a narrative. But keep aside the narratives. The question is the capacity. What is your capacity? And here, if our friend allows me, because among all my postings abroad, I think one that fascinated me immensely was my time in Beijing. I was there from 2005 to 2008. And it was not just the high-rise buildings, the high-speed trains, the expressways, and the railroads that impressed me. They were, of course, preparing for the Beijing Olympics 2008. So the Beijing landscape was changing every day, every week. But what impressed me was Because to know any country, any people, you need to understand their mind. What impressed me was their thought, their thinking.
Correct.
The intellectual prowess. It appeared to me to be a veritable renaissance of the Chinese civilization, which is plus 5,000 years old. It was visible in the performing arts. It is unbelievable. You have to see it to believe it. There was a group, My Dream, if I get the title correct, all composed of peoples with special abilities, somebody having no eyes, no sight, no arms, no legs. But they performed in such a spectacular way. And if they could do it, China is one people, one nation that can achieve any heights.
So we'll come to China again, sir. But while we were discussing India, there was one thing which I wanted to ask you, particularly because of your experience in India. Now, on Kashmir, we see the inability of our state to do anything about Kashmir. What we want, what we desire is one thing, and what the reality is different, and there's a huge gap. Kashmiris are being brutalized. What can Pakistani state actually do for the Kashmiris?
That's a very straight question, I must say, and I think it deserves a straight answer. The first thing, we should not mislead the Kashmiris. We should not give the Kashmiris an impression that we can do so many things for you and you continue your struggle. They will nonetheless continue their struggle. In my meetings with Sayyid Ali Gilani, several of them, when I was in India, he was not worried about Kashmir, he was worried about Pakistan. He said, you make yourself own self strong. We will manage. But, to give you a straight answer, we have to start thinking, and I've been saying it umpteen times in my telegrams from Delhi. We need to find ways and means to strengthen the civil society in Kashmir. The teachers, the doctors, the students, prepare them for the long haul. A new generation is now taking charge. We have to enable them, and there are ways to do it. And I think that it's quite obvious, there are several instances where the Kashmiri diaspora abroad has supported such movements, such organizations. The West has used the civil society for its own ends everywhere in the world, in Africa, in Asia, and Latin America. I think we need to get into this out-of-box thinking. By just, publishing brochures on human rights is not enough. When I was in Delhi, the German ambassador, he arranged a music thing, a Sufi thing on Kashmir. Of course, some of us were very concerned, but then I went to see him. And we said that, well, this is a disputed territory and you are doing this grand show. But in retrospect, now when I think about it, I think it was good because there is so much in terms of Kashmir that would appeal to the world.
So
in terms of its philosophy, its culture, its arts, its beauty, scenic beauty, etc. We need to also, show that and just not the brutalities. But
sir, the Kashmiris are being brutalized at the moment. They are suffering. Now, you want to show the beauty of the intellectual beauty, the culture, the arts of Kashmir to the world. But what is happening to the people? How are you going to bring the world to realize that Kashmiris are suffering?
My friend, if I were to tell you that the road to Srinagar goes through Delhi, will you believe it? Just think about it. Just think about the frailty of the Indian Union. More than 1/3 of the Indian territory is under active insurgencies.
Exactly.
Right? Take the Northeast. Now you see what is happening. Yes. So we don't have to talk about these things, but we know. I mean, my friend Riaz Khogar talks of the full spectrum, and full
exactly.
spectrum.
That's what I wanted to
full
talk
spectrum
about.
is absolutely necessary, for the defense of the Kashmiris.
Sir, do you subscribe to full spectrum?
Yes, absolutely, I do subscribe to full spectrum.
So how to go about it?
Well, I think there are ways to go about it, but maybe we will have to do nothing and just wait it out. We just strengthen, support the way we have done the Kashmiri people, especially the civil society, the doctors, the younger people and all that. And let's see what happens, because history has its own ways to unfold the truth. Even today, if India were to take back, they will never do that. Take back their decisions of the 5th of August 2019. I don't think we should talk to them. They have the only condition on which Pakistan should engage with India is that they stop the brutalization and withdraw their forces.
But what if they change the demography of
which is happening
the
now?
state, which they have already started?
It's not that easy. But of course, we have to be mindful of that. If they are going to change demography, then that will cost them very dearly.
Tanveer, would you like to? This?
Sir, you have served for quite a long time in OIC, since we were talking of India and Kashmir and all those. And since we are one of the founding members, and Pakistan has done a lot in the OIC on many on directions and all. Lately, I'm sure you must be aware that the Foreign Minister had given a statement with regard to Kashmir and the role of OIC and the countries. What do you see right now, that why we are not getting support from the Islamic countries or the OIC as an organization, especially on the issue of Kashmir?
Well, I think the perception that we are not getting support is not correct. The Foreign Minister's remarks have been misconstrued. He spoke in a limited way in terms of convening a conference of foreign ministers on Kashmir. That was his main point. But to stretch it and to say that the OIC support is not with Pakistan or the Kashmiris is factually incorrect. As you mentioned, I've served in the OIC. And right from the beginning, the first statement, 1989, the Kashmiri Intifada came from Jeddah, from the OIC Secretary General, followed by the first resolution in the Cairo Islamic Conference of Foreign Ministers, 1991, introduced by Pakistan. Saibzada Yaqub Khan was there, Foreign Secretary Shahryar Mohammad Khan. I was, of course, in the Secretariat. We established as you know, the contact group on Kashmir that meets frequently, especially at the ministerial levels during the sessions of the General Assembly. At all crucial moments, and generally in terms of principles, the OIC has adopted at the summit and ministerial levels numerous resolutions. And it's not just on the Kashmir issue. There is a running item on the question of the treatment of Muslim minorities in India. There is a running item on the destruction of the Babri Mosque. There are several reports of the OIC on the human rights situation in Kashmir. But having said that, I think I want to sort of make it absolutely, I am appalled by this social media commentary which blame OIC for lack of support. It's simply not the case.
That's interesting, sir, because again, I'm going to interrupt you. You said OIC, you were appalled at this suggestion that OIC is not supporting Kashmir. But let's see, Saudi Arabia, when they have yet to condemn what has happened in Kashmir. UAE, only 2 countries have come out outright in support of Kashmir, that is Turkey and Malaysia.
Also Azerbaijan.
Also Azerbaijan, exactly. So if there is a support for Kashmir in OIC, why are the OIC member countries not coming straight out on it?
My friend, look at the membership of the OIC. Okay? Majority are African countries. Majority of the membership is from Africa, number 1. Number 2, you mentioned some specific countries that they have not been forthcoming. Historically, that has not been the case. Without Saudi support, without the UAE support, without the support of other Gulf countries, they could have blocked the resolutions anytime they wanted. They did not, right? The question is whether you need a special session or not. That's a separate issue, and one has to look at it at a deeper level. But also, please do not forget, and this is a very broad subject, and I don't know whether we have the time to go into it, but what has happened to multilateral institutions over the past decade plus? Is UN, more specifically the Security Council, effective today? It's only in our minds. Multilateralism has continued to recede in efficacy the world over. And we have, in this age of unipolarity, which is now about to pass, seen the predominance of one state, and they have started to disown the UN.
Sir, then I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. Then there's a need for the government to tell the people that because there's a demand that what the UN Security Council is doing, what the OIC is doing. So the question is, there's a weakness as far as our narrative is concerned within the country to convince the people or to those groups who have been criticizing that Pakistan is doing nothing and what the UN Security Council or OIC is doing. What should we do?
Yeah, I agree with you. I won't say it's the weakness on the part of the government. It is weakness on the part of our understanding of the global situation. You know, it is people like us, and more, you know, people who study the world, who are, you know, more involved, to understand what has happened. It is not only on Kashmir. It is not only, you know, what are the reasons for the failure of the United Nations. The whole episode, chapter and verse, is now imploding before our eyes. What happened to the climate change, you know, pact, right? What has happened in the Conference on Disarmament? For 20 years, it's been at a standstill. We still have people going there every day, you know, to do the ritual. But we must create an understanding of the realities of today. We are too much caught up. It is true, people of Pakistan was born in the world of the United Nations, 47.
Correct.
There is a deep idealistic streak that runs through our minds. We were pained even when the Ottoman Caliphate was being disbanded. And you know the history, right? It is this thing, you know, this idealism, this passion to see justice, to see humanity. What was the need for Pakistan to go out of its way to support the processes of decolonization in Islamic lands, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, whatever, Palestine. How many times did Yasser Arafat visit Pakistan? They always preferred India to Pakistan. What about other brotherly Arab states? They always gave preference to India over Pakistan because they did not have that idealistic streak. Even today, as Israel extends its arms towards the UAE and Bahrain and possibly to other Gulf states, we are the ones who are worried. Why should we be worried? It is a rhetorical point that I'm trying to make.
Very pertinent point.
But what is there? How is Israel inimical to Pakistan? On what grounds? Have we ever debated this? I'm not saying we should recognize Israel. But what I'm saying is this: we are wrapped in thoughts, deep down, which are correct, but which do not conform to the realities of the day. So let's not be too self-critical. I'm not making a case to abandon idealism. I'm not saying abandon the principles on which we support Palestine or Kashmir. I'm not saying, submit to pragmatism and expediencies. No, we should not do that. But we have to set our priorities right. And our priorities, of course, means in terms of the pursuit of national interest, we have to be very clear. China could have captured Taiwan.
Correct.
At
Hong
will.
Kong or Macau.
And Macau.
Yeah.
They did not. Why? They settled their boundaries which were contested with the Soviet Union. Nearly all of them in no time.
Correct.
The only thing is India, right? Why? The reason is simple. I was told by Vice Foreign Minister Wu Dewei in the Chinese Foreign Office. And we were discussing something and he stopped me and he said, "Ambassador, you do not understand. China's strategic priority is development. And I want to tell you, we will pursue this priority even if the heavens were to fall." These are, I remember the words spoken maybe in 2006.
Wonderful.
That is how it is.
Right.
You look at the words scripted. There's a book called, a compendium called The Governance of China by
right.
Xi Jinping.
Right.
Just look at some of the paragraphs there. Talks of 2021, when China will become a moderately developed socialist state, and by 2049, a fully developed country.
Imran,
Right.
if
Yeah.
you
Even-
permit me, I just, sir, a straight question. You have seen UAE has recognized Israel, so has Bahrain. And I think now there must be some thinking in a sense that what is going on? And if the major GCC countries, of course, Saudi Arabia hasn't done it yet, but for all practical purposes, the way Saudis have allowed overflight permissions to the Israeli aircraft, so in that way, I think it's only a matter of time that when Saudi Arabia will also recognize Israel. What is fault of ours? The reason being that we have no direct confrontation. We have been, in a way, not recognizing Israel because of the Muslim Ummah, because of the Islamic causes. Directly, we don't have any confrontation.
Absolutely.
What is your take?
My take is very simple. And I may be completely wrong, so I start on that note. The Arab peace plan talks of a two-state solution, which means the state of Israel and the Palestinian state. We have been supportive of the Arab position, right? Number one. Number two, the issue of Palestine for us is also the issue of Al-Quds al-Sharif, the third Qibla. And there is no going back on that. We support the return of Al-Quds Sharif to Muslim Palestinian sovereignty. Having said that, we've got to look at the historical facts. Give you two examples. UAE and this thing is Bahrain is recent. Tayyip Erdogan, a great leader of brotherly people of Turkey. But we all know how long they've had very close relationship.
They still have, I think.
They still have. Morocco, they may not have exchanged embassies, but there are direct flights.
Yes,
I'm
and
told.
they accept their passports also.
They accept passports and there is tourism.
Exactly.
So, not to talk of Jordan and others and the Egyptians. I don't say that we should do it out of expediency, but as Pakistan, and it's not my domain, I am now an ordinary citizen of this country. But I think my take is that for too long we have been followers. It is on occasions that we ought to take a lead.
Right, sir. Thank
Sir,
you.
a supplementary question. That won't it be advisable to go to Al-Quds Sharif to offer our prayers?
Absolutely, we should.
Yes.
Absolutely,
So for that,
we need to have arrangements.
You have to evolve a modus vivendi whereby you have the access. Right now, if you don't recognize or you don't have any dialogue with Israel, you don't have access to Al-Quds.
Absolutely correct, Asif.
I agree.
Ambassador Salman Bashir has given his view. Ladies and gentlemen, the crux was we should be very clear about the development of our country. We should determine our priorities and our foreign policy should follow that. This is the end of part 1 of our talk with Ambassador Salman Bashir. Thank you very much for watching and we will be back.